Tonight's Eye on the Prize segment, of course, is, well, there's only one prize we've got our eye on. It's the midterm elections coming up in just 3.5 weeks, and we're looking for a majority in the House and the Senate. But there's also some key governor's races that we got to pay close attention to as well. And let's face it, if you're hooked on politics, if you're hooked on all the information that you need to know what's going to happen in these midterms or any election, then that means you go to RealClearPolitics on a very regular basis. The guy who makes things happen over there is Tom Bevan, and he joins us now. Tom, thanks for being here.
Great to be with you.
Well, first of all, you guys, of course, have sort of cornered the market on the whole idea of aggregating various poll numbers, coming up with the famous RCP average of polls. But, listen, the last several years, certainly since the 2016 election, there's been a lot of inaccuracy in how these races are determined. Where are you sitting right now in terms of your confidence level on how this race is being polled?
That's a good question. I mean, there is the chance that some of these polls are underestimating the support of Republican candidates. And so what we've done is we've actually taken a look at, over the last 3 cycles, in some of these key states like Pennsylvania, for example, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona, to find out how the polling has been in those states in particular races. And so we have put that information out there as well, so that people can have just another way of looking at this race and understanding, look, if the polls are off as they have been over the last few cycles in the same way, for example, in Pennsylvania, that race would show, right now the polls show Fetterman up about 4.5 points. GOP support in Pennsylvania has been underestimated by the polls over the last 3 cycles by about 5 or 5.5%. So that would give you an idea that race is potentially very, very close. Mehmet Oz might actually be ahead a little bit. Again, if how the polls have been off in recent cycles continues again this cycle.
Okay.
In a place like Georgia, for example, the polls haven't been off at all over the last 3 cycles. So you look at that race with Raphael Warnock with about a 2.5 or 3 point lead there, and you think, okay, well, that, given where the polls have been recently, he's probably ahead in that race.
That one's also an interesting one, Georgia, because, as you said, right now the Democrat Raphael Warnock is showing a lead of about 3 or 4 points. But Stacey Abrams, the Democrat who's running for governor, is behind by considerably more. So you really have an electorate that appears to be crossing party lines, at least on their responses to pollsters. Whether they do that when they get into the ballot curtains, who knows?
Yeah, I think, to me, actually, that's one of the most interesting things about this election. Obviously, we're a very tribal country. 2016 was the first election in our history where every single state voted the same at the federal level for president and for Senate. So there was not a single state that voted for Donald Trump and then a Democrat or vice versa. So you look at split ticket voting and think, well, what are the odds that Brian Kemp is going to win in Georgia? He's a popular incumbent governor. He's going to win by 8 points over the Democrat Stacey Abrams, as you mentioned. And yet, Herschel Walker's not going to win against Raphael Warnock. That Republican voters are either going to just leave that space blank, or that there will be folks who are going to cross over. It doesn't seem likely. However, we're seeing this dynamic not just in Georgia. It's happening in Arizona, for example. It's happening in a couple of other states. And if you look back, one of the corollaries is 2018 Arizona, where you had Doug Ducey, popular incumbent governor, win by double digits, while at the same time, Martha McSally, the Republican candidate there, lost to Kirsten Sinema by a couple of percentage points. So it is possible. It does happen. And we'll have to see whether that is something that proves true just a few weeks from today.
All right, let's focus on some of the higher profile races. You mentioned the Pennsylvania Senate race. Let's go to that one again. Because, the polls are now showing Fetterman still up by about 3 or 4, I think you said. But a lot of times in the final weeks leading up to Election Day, Tom, it's about the trajectory. It's about the momentum. And it appears that Oz has been picking up quite a bit of ground over the last couple of months, hasn't he?
He has. And there are 2 reasons for that. Number one, Oz's campaign has really honed in on the issue of crime, and Fetterman's some of his past statements about wanting to, pardon folks, let folks out of jail, including folks who've been convicted of second-degree murder. With the crime rate in Philadelphia, it is a very, very salient issue in the suburbs of Philly, which is, again, an area that Oz is going to have to do very well in. And the other issue that's coming to the fore now is Fetterman's health, and the fact that He just did this interview with MSNBC where he had to use closed captioning. The reporter, she had said during their sort of initial, small talk before the interview that he seemed confused, had trouble following the conversation. So that is clearly an issue. It's one of the reasons that he is only debating right at the last minute, October 25th, and only one debate. And the Oz campaign is obviously highlighting that as an issue of whether he's been transparent about his health issues and just how bad they are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think every American has somebody in their family who has a disability or has special needs or children. I know I do. And so I'm torn on this issue because I recognize people needing special assistance to be able to function, and that's a good thing. Our society should accommodate them. Frankly, I think the voters are really recoiling right now at what you just pointed at, the lack of transparency. Basically, up until now, he's just said, doctor gave me a note and said I can serve. That's not really good enough. I think we do need to see some more specifics on his medical condition, as at the beginning, right, when he won the primary, it was sort of like, oh, yeah, I had a mild stroke, but everything's fine. Well, clearly everything isn't fine. And I think that is something that voters won't have a lot of tolerance for, is sort of this sense that he's hiding something.
And just to put a point on that, this is not just a partisan issue. I mean, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, New York Times, Washington Post, others have called for him to be transparent and release his medical record.
Yeah. I could talk to you forever, Tom, because you're so good at this stuff, but I do want to get to some of these other races. Pennsylvania is important because that could be a Democrat flip, right? That's a Republican seat to me. Same thing in Ohio. What is the Ohio race looking like right now?
The Ohio race, they just had their first debate on Monday. They'll be having another one next Monday. It's close. I mean, there's a poll that just came out showing J.D. Vance up 1 point. He's up in our average. He's up in the majority of polls in Ohio, but it is close. And J.D. Vance is polling considerably less well than Mike DeWine at the top of the ticket. Mike DeWine is up by anywhere from 15 to 20 points, depending on the poll.
Yeah.
J.D. Vance is only up by a couple of points. And so I think that race is going to be close. However, Ohio is one of those states that has underestimated Republican support. So again, this is a state that Trump won by 8 points. The polls show that he's still leading there by 8 points in a potential 2024 matchup. So there's no reason to believe that Ohio has shifted dramatically to the left over the last couple of years. And that's why I think J.D. Vance is in the driver's seat in that race.
Interesting. Yeah, I was just going to say that it seems like Ohio, we were always told it's a toss-up, and then the last several elections hasn't been much of a toss-up. All right, how about Wisconsin? I know there's a lot of attention from the Democrats on that Senate race.
Yeah, that's another race that was very, very close. Democrats were thinking it was one that they could pick up. However, again, on the issue of crime, I think Ron Johnson has really honed in on that issue against Mandela Barnes, the lieutenant governor there. And the most recent polls show Ron Johnson expanding his lead. The Marquette University Law School poll, which had him up a point just a month ago, now he's up 6 points in that poll. He's ahead in other polls. And so this is a race that I think has shifted in the Republicans' favor over the last couple of weeks, and one that they are feeling better about as they get closer to Election Day.
Tom, let's look at some of these governor races, high-profile ones. This one should be pretty fast. Hurricane Ian was certainly a test for Ron DeSantis, and he seemed to perform pretty well there. Thank God, by the way, for the people of Florida. Is that going to be close? It looks like he's going away.
Yeah, no, the latest polls have him up double digits, and I think he's a heavy favorite to win that.
How about Arizona?
Win re-election there.
Carrie Lake seems to be so telegenic, but she's a controversial. People have very strong opinions about her. But Katie Hobbs refuses to debate her. Is that hurting Katie Hobbs?
I think it is, actually. I think the fact that, Carrie Lake is out there saying, look, this is a job interview. She's willing to take questions anytime. Katie Hobbs has been running a really weird campaign where she's sort of hiding out, refuses to debate, says she doesn't want to talk politics with people she doesn't know. I mean, it's just, I think it is starting to hurt her, especially as voters are getting tuned in now and wanting to hear from both these candidates. They're really, they're not hearing from Katie Hobbs in the same way that they're hearing for Carrie Lake, and it's showing up in the polls.
Do you want to give us a prediction on the House and Senate?
So the House right now, we're showing a range of pickups for Republicans, anywhere from 7 to 42 seats. I think the average gain is about 24 seats, which, again, is below a historical average for a party facing their first midterm. So, but that would give them a clear majority in the House of Representatives. Even if Democrats have a good night, it's going to be tough for them to keep hold of the House.
Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics. Thanks a bunch. More to come tonight on O'Connor Tonight.